Hello, Pickles and Hairspray group. Welcome to video number 3 from Joe. I'm very appreciative of everybody's kind words and requests for more videos. And I'm really sorry about this backlight. I just realized I used to make a lot of videos back in the day and I haven't in years. I seem to suck at it. Okay, so today's video is my favorites. I keep saying this every day. I say it's my favorite subject. This is truly my favorite subject. It's bodily autonomy. So I first discovered the term bodily autonomy probably within the last 10 years online. Somebody used it while it was some blog posting of a woman who had written a blog about how the woman her husband married was thin and pretty. And as she got older, she got fatter. And she felt like she owed it to her husband. She felt like, she didn't use the word defrauded, but I'm just going to use that word because we all know what it means. She felt like she defrauded him because she'd gotten fat. So she needed to get skinny to give him the woman he married. And she just articulated it very badly. And everybody, all the feminists in the group jumped on her. And somebody said, you know, your body doesn't belong to him and you have bodily autonomy. And that was the first time in my life I'd ever heard those two words strung together. And they changed my life. They hit me like, I don't know, many daggers in it was good rays of sunshine, I guess. And so to backtrack, I was raised fundy, but a version of fundy, so not Christian but Catholic, a version of Catholic called the charismatic movement, which is akin to Pentecostalism in the Christian denomination world. But my mother was like an Angela's Ashes Catholic, that is to say, very devout and very strict Catholic, and I was raised with very devout and strict ways. And a lot of Catholicism in the 40s and 50s, and the things girls and women were taught in that era that my mother was taught, was very much like what Michelle Duggar preaches. So I remember vividly, I'll give you 3 examples. I remember my mother saying when we were teenage, I think when she was trying to teach us about sex without the word sex, because, you know, we don't talk about that sort of thing. I remember her suggesting that when you get married, you're 2 in 1 flesh. You belong to your husband and he belongs to you, and there is no differentiation. You are just one person with 2 personalities, basically. But it was made very clear very early on that the ownership, he owned your body. That there was no variation on that theme, that basically your body was his. Now, whether his was yours was neither here nor there. It was you know, it's patriarchal religion, so of course they're going to suggest that the woman's body is his. Okay, which brings us to number 2. I vividly remember my mother saying this. I must have been about 12 or 13, maybe just prepubescent. My sister would have been 13 or 14, a year older. And my mother was saying that there were a couple of things. If you turn a man on, if you sit on his lap and give him an erection, it's your sin, not his. But the bigger one was that if your husband, now once you're married and you can have sex, if you deny your husband sex and he masturbates, that sin is on your shoulders, not his, because you denied him sex, and you must and always must say yes. Be joyfully available. My mother taught us this. And somebody, a few days ago on the Pickles and Hairspray board, we were discussing this about being joyfully available. Yes, I was taught that in those words. Yes. And I was, at the time, thought it was normal. Like any cult member, you really do just think that's, your mother teaches it to you and you nod like everything else. Over the years, I remember expressing that opinion, maybe to friends or people who weren't as devout and cultish as I was, and they were horrified, and I was kind of horrified that they were horrified. I thought it was totally normal, and then once I snapped out of it, and later when I discovered bodily autonomy, which we'll get to in a bit, I was horrified that I had ever believed such a thing. But yes, that you must be joyfully available to your husband, because for him to masturbate is a sin. And my mother always made it very clear that men had very, very hypersexual needs, and it was up to you. Like, even though you might not be in the mood for sex, they're always in the mood for sex, so you must always oblige. Again, years later, having conversations with my mother about marital rape, what marital rape was, she gets so mad at me when we have this conversation. She does not believe that she's a victim of rape. She does not believe that she is a victim of marital rape. She believes that, she consented when she said I do, that first and only time, and every time thereafter was consent, was implied consent. She and I've had many, I'm 45 years old, she's 77, we have had many arguments. There is no getting through to her. She believes what she believes, and I believe what I believe. So back to bodily autonomy, and I have brought this up with Mom on occasion. I've said, guess what, Mom? I learned a new term. It's called bodily autonomy. It means I own this. This is mine. I get to decide who touches it, when, where, how, under what circumstance. I get to decide these things. And she looked at me like I was crazy, because that is just not in her worldview. In her worldview, her body belongs to her husband. And it dawned on me, and I, it's funny, I shouldn't keep bringing her into the equation. By the way, I have mommy issues. I have daddy issues. When you're raised in a fundamentalist cult with patriarchal leanings, you're bound to have mommy and daddy issues, because my mother twisted my mind to believe a bunch of shit. My father, didn't complain. I mean, somebody's doing the dishes and washing his underwear, so what's he got to complain about? I think it twists the child mind. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I believe raising a child in any religion is child abuse. I really do. I believe brainwashing in any form, even in liberal Christianity, even in just generic, like, run-of-the-mill Christianity, I believe that's child abuse. I believe people should have a right to choose what they want to choose when they're of an age to choose, and not to be swayed one way or the other in childhood when they're not able to make up their minds or able to discern what's right and what's wrong. I watch a lot of stuff about cults. But bodily autonomy was this thing when I suddenly realized you don't have to, when you're a little kid and someone sits you on your uncle's lap and says, kiss Uncle so-and-so, and he's creepy and stinky and you don't want to. And this is something when you're a little kid, especially a little girl or born in a little girl's body, you have to oblige the hugging and the kissing of relatives. And it's not you don't get to consent or not consent. You're thrust into these situations where you have to kiss your family members or hug your family members. And I was a squawky little kid, like I was a rebel, I was a tomboy. I used to not hug people and not shake their hands and not kiss them. And my mother would yell at me and say, she's being willful. My sister, by the way, would always oblige and always do the right thing. And she was a good little girl. And she's got her own issues now. I mean, I'll have to bring her on for a video with my sister, because she and I went in such different directions. We're both radical feminists, don't get me wrong. We're both like very interesting and whole people at this point in our lives, in our 40s. But, we went in very different directions as a result of being raised in this very fundy way. By the way, you should just know that I was fundy. I was that fundy. I did believe that strongly. I drank the Kool-Aid. I sat down at the table and ate it up with gusto. She did not. She never really was a true believer. She just went through the motions. Whereas I was a true believer, and I was like a lunatic, rabid true believer till I was about 18. So I know of what I speak when we talk about the Duggar girls and how they get that glassy-eyed look and how they agree with this patriarchal shit that's been crammed down their throat. I did too. That's just how it is when it's all you've ever known and you believe it to be right. When I discovered bodily autonomy, and I discovered that I don't have to hug anybody, I don't have to kiss anybody, I don't have to have sex with anybody ever if I don't want to. I don't have to let anybody tell me what I should look like, what my hair or face or weight should be. Was probably the most empowering thing that ever happened to me. I've clung to those two words, bodily autonomy, for as long as I can remember, at least the last 10 years since I heard them. I use them in conversation regularly. I try to use those words when I talk to the teenage kids in my life, or even the younger kids in my life. Which actually brings me to a story. What time? 8 minutes. Okay, so I got just a minute left. Just on the tail end of yesterday's video, we were talking about toxic masculinity. I'm a computer technician who works in public elementary and high schools. And I was with a grade 9 girl, very young, very sweet young girl. She like very young for her age. She was in grade 9, physically 14, but possibly prepubescent. And we were talking about something, and she's smart as a whip. And she said the funniest thing I think I've ever heard. She said this boy that liked her in grade 8 used to like her all the time, but he recently turned on her and is being very mean to her. And he said, like pulling my hair and being rude. And I said, why do you think he's doing that? And she said, oh, well, it's obvious. He's a victim of toxic masculinity. He thinks if he can't have me as his girlfriend, then I guess he's got to be mean to me because I've turned him down. At which point I burst into laughter. How do you know what toxic masculinity is? Anyway, this kid, I just wanted to share that story because she's a brilliant little thing and she made my day. Good talking to you guys. I'll see you guys probably tomorrow or the next day. Give me some ideas of other videos you want to see, and we'll keep talking about all things Duggar. Bye-bye.